Hello everyone! Recently, a shocking scandal has once again shaken public confidence in the American police force. A Vietnamese-American officer from the New York Police Department, someone who once swore to protect and serve, had secretly spent years acting as a ghost, aiding criminals from within the system. He used his badge to clear the way for illegal shipments of contraband and even used his issued firearm to shield criminals. The story feels like a slap to the face of justice, revealing how someone entrusted with upholding the law became a traitor operating in the shadows. So how did a man who once wore the prestigious police uniform quietly support a drug trafficking network in the heart of New York for years? And what finally caused his perfectly crafted cover to collapse? In the next part of this video, the hidden truth behind this double-dealing officer will be exposed. Please note that all content in today's video has been researched and compiled from multiple sources. If there's anything that needs to be added or corrected, feel free to leave a comment so we can update it promptly. And if you found today's case thought-provoking, please share the video to help the information reach more people. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Vietnamese Case Files so we know you're still here supporting our dedicated true crime stories. Early one morning in November 2025, federal agents simultaneously raided the private residence of former NYPD officer Andrew Nguyen, a quiet home tucked inside a peaceful neighborhood that appeared completely ordinary. Yet only minutes after entering, agents were stunned by what they found. The entire house was essentially an armory. Weapons, ammunition, and evidence linked to criminal activity were hidden in a highly organized manner. On the kitchen counter, investigators found a loaded Glock 19 with hollow point rounds ammunition, often banned due to its devastating impact. Inside a storage closet, they seized two AR-15 style semi-automatic rifles, along with a customized short barrel rifle. There was also a large drum magazine loaded with 60 rounds and numerous other ammunition boxes scattered throughout the house. Among this arsenal, investigators also found Nguyen's NYPD nameplate and parking access card. In addition, multiple electronic devices and Nguyen's phones were confiscated for further analysis. The scene left even veteran agents shaking their heads in disbelief, muttering, "We really raised a snake in our own sleeve." What led to this raid, given that Andrew Nguyen had once served alongside them? It turned out that since 2023, after detecting multiple irregularities, authorities had suspected news of involvement in drug trafficking activities and quietly placed him under surveillance. They began gathering evidence and tracing cases he had handled in the past. From there, investigators discovered that he had queried the names of several drug trafficking suspects unrelated to his assigned cases. This was clear proof that Nguyen was accessing internal databases for personal purposes. Authorities also secretly monitored his bank account. Over several years, multiple cash deposits totaling more than $30,000 were made into this account, with no legitimate source recorded. For someone with the steady income of a police officer, this suspicious flow of money immediately became a major red flag. To obtain evidence strong enough for prosecution, federal agents decided to set a trap and catch him in the act. They used an undercover agent to approach Nguyen and the individuals he protected, referred to as CC1-inch the case files. The plan was as follows. The undercover agent would pose as a new drug dealer and ask CC1 to hire Nguyen to transport 5 kilograms of illegal drugs from the Bronx to Queens for an attractive price. As expected, Nguyen immediately agreed when he learned that successfully delivering the 5 kilograms would earn him $5,000. The transaction was arranged at a secluded meeting point. Nguyen arrived in his personal vehicle, carrying his firearm and police badge as he usually did. At the meeting spot, the undercover agent handed Nguyen a suitcase containing 5 fake packages of product, while Nguyen handed over a symbolic payment to complete the deal. The entire exchange was captured clearly by hidden cameras from multiple angles. Nguyen appeared calm and efficient, clear signs that this was far from the first time he had done such a thing. And this recording marked the end of the criminal path he had been following for years. Investigators did not stop there. They used multiple investigative techniques to strengthen the case. They tracked GPS data from Nguyen's vehicle and phone to match his movements with suspicious locations, and they analyzed traffic camera footage to determine whether Nguyen's patrol car had been near drug-related locations at unusual times. Piece by piece, each clue fit into place. forming a complete case file revealing the systematic misconduct of a police officer once trusted by the public. After gathering sufficient evidence, prosecutors launched the operation to raid Nguyen's home in 2025, as previously described. From the moment Andrew Nguyen was arrested, the judicial machinery moved swiftly. Notably, when investigators reviewed data on Nguyen's phone, they found a message showing that right after he was fired from the NYPD for an unrelated violation in late 2023, he shamelessly expressed interest in working for a drug trafficking kingpin. This blunt message was considered a form of self-incrimination, proving Nguyen was fully willing to abandon his role as a former officer for money. During interrogation, knowing he could no longer avoid responsibility, Andrew Nguyen admitted part of his actions in hopes of receiving a lighter sentence. He described in detail everything he had done, from transporting drugs while armed, to staging fake arrests, to accessing confidential databases and providing information to the drug lord. Nguyen also admitted that carrying his gun and badge was not for self-defense as regulations require, but to facilitate the drug trafficking operation. With the recorded confession and the extensive case file previously collected, the federal investigation finally came to an end after a long and arduous process. So what exactly caused a seemingly dedicated officer to spiral into wrongdoing? Let's look back at his background for answers. Andrew Nguyen, 41 years old, was a Vietnamese-American born and raised in the New York area. He began his career with the NYPD around 2005 or 2006, assigned to the Transit Bureau, the division responsible for public transportation security. For most of his service, Nguyen worked in Transit District 12 inches the Bronx. The assignment was far from easy, as the Bronx has long been an area with high crime rates, and patrolling the subway system meant confronting incidents of all kinds, big and small, every single day. According to his colleagues, Nguyen was energetic, knowledgeable about the local area, and unafraid of danger. On the surface, he appeared to be a dedicated officer ready to protect the community. However, even early in his career, signs of ethical misconduct began to emerge. According to investigative documents, between 2008 and 2009, he secretly collaborated with a drug trafficker. This individual was CC1, an old acquaintance from before Nguyen joined the force. During that period, Nguyen abused his position to share confidential information about rival gangs with CC1. Not only that, he even appeared at certain meetings of the group as protection, always carrying his firearm, an act that violated police protocol entirely. When his colleagues were preparing to conduct raids in specific areas, Nguyen quietly tipped off his partners so they could escape beforehand. The most serious incident occurred when CC1 was arrested during a surprise inspection at a warehouse. Instead of supporting his team and following procedure, Nguyen secretly removed part of the seized evidence to destroy it. This was considered extremely serious misconduct, interfering with an active investigation to protect criminals. After that event, Nguyen seemed to lay low for a long period. Over the next 10 years, he continued working and was promoted through seniority, eventually becoming one of the veteran officers of Transit District 12. But by 2020, possibly due to financial strain during the pandemic, Andrew Nguyen returned to the criminal path. He proactively contacted his old friend, who by then had become a drug trafficking kingpin and needed an insider within the police department. Their reunion marked the beginning of Nguyen's second downfall, even more severe than the first. From 2020 to 2023, as mentioned earlier, he received more than $30,000 for providing protection and transporting drugs for the organization. To avoid suspicion for such a long time, Andrew Nguyen took full advantage of his professional knowledge and authority. Each time he transported shipments, he carried his NYPD-issued handgun. Not only that, he kept his police badge and parking access card with him to avoid drawing suspicion from patrol units or being subjected to random checks. Beyond physically transporting drugs, Nguyen also acted as an undercover bodyguard for the kingpin. On many occasions, he served as the driver for CC1 during important transactions. His presence acted as a silent warning. Anyone attempting to interfere risked being handled by a police officer on the spot. Thus, the public authority he once held became twisted into a shield for criminals. More dangerously, Nguyen exploited the internal database system of the New York Police Department to aid the drug operation. Using his officer-level access, he secretly searched for classified information such as home addresses, criminal records, and active investigations targeting CC1's rivals, then leaked all this information so the kingpin could prepare countermeasures. On one occasion, Nguyen even offered to personally arrest a competing dealer of CC1 to clear the way, as long as he was paid accordingly. Had this plan been executed, it would have represented the peak of corruption. A police officer using his authority to arrest someone not for justice, but for payment from criminals. Shockingly, Nguyen even staged fake arrests to serve the drug ring's schemes. In early 2021, CC1 fell into heavy debt after losing a shipment of marijuana belonging to a distribution partner. To save his friend from that massive debt, Nguyen devised a plan to pretend to stop CC1's vehicle on the street, confiscate all the drugs and cash he was carrying, and make it appear like a legitimate bust. Thanks to this staged incident, CC1 had a legitimate excuse to tell his supplier that the drugs and cash had been confiscated by police. As a result, the debt was effectively erased, while Nguyen pocketed about $10,000 as a reward for pulling off the deception. But it didn't stop there. Andrew Nguyen was already entertaining even darker schemes if the price was right. According to case files, he once suggested kidnapping 2 debtors of another drug kingpin, referred to as CC2, pretending it was a lawful arrest before handing them over to CC2 for punishment. Fortunately, this police impersonation kidnapping plot was never carried out. Similarly, Nguyen, CC1, and another associate known as CC3 even discussed robbing a cash courier involved in drug transactions by staging a fake traffic stop. Although these plans were never executed, the mere intention revealed that Andrew Nguyen had lost every remaining sense of moral boundaries. Many Vietnamese who once knew him were shocked and disappointed to learn he had become a criminal. They remembered him as a quiet man with a family and young children, active in community events. Yet behind their backs, he lived a double life, helping funnel illegal drugs into the very neighborhoods he once promised to protect. For his colleagues at the New York Police Department, Nguyen's downfall was humiliating. An Asian American officer who once passed the rigorous NYPD selection process and served for more than a decade ultimately betrayed his team for dirty money. This story left fellow officers both angry and insulted. From the Vietnamese community to the NYPD ranks, everyone saw Andrew Nguyen's case as a painful lesson about ethics and loyalty. Given the severity of the scandal, the case of Andrew Nguyen was brought directly to the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York, an institution known for its strict handling of corruption within public service. On November 4th, 2025, a lengthy indictment spanning dozens of pages was publicly released, immediately drawing media attention. In the defendant's seat, Andrew Nguyen appeared in an orange jumpsuit, his wrists and ankles shackled. He only lifted his head once when the judge called his name, then spent the rest of the hearing staring downward, avoiding all eye contact. The federal indictment detailed how Andrew Nguyen had severely violated the duties of a police officer, beginning with the charge of honest services fraud. This charge alleged that he exploited his public position for personal gain, betraying the responsibility to serve the community. It is a charge commonly used for corrupt public officials and carries a penalty of up to 20 years in prison. Accompanying this was the charge of conspiracy to commit honest services fraud, indicating that Nguyen did not act alone but colluded with multiple individuals to undermine the proper function of government agencies. Under these charges, defendants can face a maximum sentence of 20 years. Additionally, the indictment showed that Nguyen had repeatedly accepted or solicited illicit payments totaling more than $30,000 to overlook or assist criminal operations. This bribery was described as a serious attack on the integrity of law enforcement, and under federal law, such conduct can carry up to 10 years in prison. However, this was only the surface of his violations. The most serious charge in the case was conspiracy to distribute more than 5 kilograms of illegal drugs. Under federal regulations, this drug quantity alone automatically triggers a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 years in prison. If prosecutors could prove that Nguyen held a significant role in transporting or protecting the drug shipments, the maximum sentence could reach life in prison. The fact that a former police officer was involved in such conduct made the case even more severe in the eyes of the court and the public. Additionally, Nguyen was charged with using his service weapon to assist and protect drug-related activities. This is a very serious federal offense. The minimum penalty for this charge is 5 years in prison, to be served consecutively to any other sentences, not concurrently. With aggravating factors, the sentence could also reach life imprisonment. Lastly, the indictment included the charge of conspiracy to commit robbery, as Nguyen and his associates had discussed staging a police-style traffic stop to rob a cash courier from a drug operation. Even though the plan was never executed, the act of planning and showing clear intent was enough to constitute a federal crime, as it impacted interstate commerce. The maximum penalty for this offense is also 20 years. Looking at the case as a whole, if convicted of all charges, Andrew Nguyen could face decades in prison, possibly even life. The 2 drug-related charges alone carry a mandatory minimum of 20 years. Adding the mandatory 5 years for the firearm charge means Nguyen would face at least 25 years. The remaining charges could be ordered to run concurrently, but by any calculation, the final sentence would be unlikely to fall below 25 to 30 years. In reality, given that the federal system offers very limited sentence reductions, Nguyen may remain incarcerated until old age. During the hearing, his defense attorney offered little substantive rebuttal to the allegations, instead requesting that Nguyen be released on bail for a reasonable amount. He argued that Nguyen had a long service record, a family, and no prior criminal history, and therefore did not pose a flight risk. However, the judge sided with prosecutors and maintained the bail amount at $400,000. This sum exceeded Nguyen's immediate ability to pay, meaning he would remain in custody while awaiting his next court dates. The case of former officer Andrew Nguyen concluded but left behind heavy consequences and profound lessons for both law enforcement and the broader community. First and foremost, it delivered a major blow to the trust New Yorkers placed in their police force. In recent years, tensions between police and the public had already been strained due to incidents involving excessive force and allegations of discrimination. Learning that an officer had participated in a drug trafficking network only deepened public unease and disappointment. When the scandal involving Andrew Nguyen came to light, the Vietnamese community in New York was also deeply shaken. The reason is simple. Very few members of the community have ever joined the police force, so each Vietnamese-American officer in a blue uniform had long been considered a source of pride. Yet now, Andrew Nguyen being exposed for his involvement in criminal activity felt like a bucket of cold water poured directly onto the trust the community once placed in him. For the New York Police Department, this case was a painful wake-up call. Although NYPD leadership emphasized that this was merely one bad apple and that the vast majority of officers remained dedicated and honest, they also had to admit that gaps existed within their internal oversight system. The lingering question troubling many was, how could an officer deceive the entire department for 3 years or possibly longer without detection? This revealed that the mechanisms for identifying corruption within the force truly required serious reevaluation. After the Andrew Nguyen scandal, it became clear that NYPD would need to tighten numerous protocols to close these loopholes. Oversight of internal database access would undoubtedly become stricter. Surprise financial audits for employees might be conducted more frequently. And mechanisms encouraging officers to report suspicious behavior would likely be strengthened. In fact, Andrew Nguyen's indictment was circulated widely within the department as a stark reminder that corruption in any form would not be tolerated. On a broader scale, the scandal also reignited a long-standing societal concern, the phenomenon of police officers falling into criminal behavior. In the United States, police are granted significant power to maintain order, but that very power can be a double-edged sword. If a police officer becomes corrupt, the harm he causes is far greater than that of an ordinary criminal, because he understands how the system operates, knows where its weaknesses lie, and most importantly possesses privileges that make wrongdoing easier. In reality, the issue of police walking hand in hand with criminals is not new. American history has witnessed entire eras marked by widespread police corruption, such as during the Knapp Commission and Mullen Commission. However, today's context is vastly different. Surveillance technologies are more advanced. public expectations for ethical conduct are higher, and demands for transparency are stronger. Therefore, although cases like that of Andrew Nguyen are rare, they create exceptional scandal and cast a long shadow over the image of honest officers who work tirelessly to keep the public safe. And what about you? What sentence do you think is appropriate for Andrew Nguyen's betrayal and disregard for professional ethics? Share your thoughts on the case in the comments below for Vietnamese Case Files. And don't forget to support Vietnamese Case Files by liking, sharing the video, and subscribing to the channel so you can continue exploring more gripping true crime stories. For now, goodbye, and see you in the next episode.